You've indicated to this committee this morning or this afternoon that you will retrieve the Smith's car. Would it be asking you too much to look into this matter and, if possible, retrieve the car involved in this accident? I want to...
If it's the accident that I'm thinking of, and we can have our staff check, both Toyota engineers and NHTSA did, in fact, inspect that vehicle.
And do you know what they determined?
I don't know what was determined.
Would you check further into this?
Yes, we'll check into if it's.
Has there been any issues with the Avalon brand?
There have been cases of both sticking pedals as well as floor mat entrapments. Yes.
Mr. Lynch, do you have any reason to believe that out of the thousands upon thousands of complaints that Toyota or Lexus owners are inventing these terrifying stories about their driving experiences?
No, but from an engineering standpoint, it's critical that we get information so that we can go and investigate. Today, in many cases, information that's submitted onto NHTSA's website, unless there's an investigation opened, we don't have the name of the customer or the full VIN number. And I think going forward, one thing that we should think about doing is make that available to the manufacturers so we can cross-reference that against our databases and we can investigate these much sooner and not have to wait for an investigation to be open to be able to do that.
From a marketing perspective, don't you feel as though Toyota and yourself, don't you feel as though you owe your customers, who some have gone through some serious injuries, a lot of hurt and pain, don't you feel as though that you owe them a sincere apology for your company, your vehicles, your product causing them sincere pain? Can't you just apologize to them?
Yes, sir, we have. Because I will tell you, and whether it is an accident, an injury, I mean, we heard the Smiths today. You didn't have to have a death to understand the terror that she had from that accident. I mean, that's a terrible thing to have to put one of our customers through. And it doesn't even have to be an accident. I mean, we have apologized to our consumers just for the concern that we have given them with their current recall vehicles. We are sincerely sorry for that concern and anxiety we've put people through. I mean, my wife drives a Toyota Prius. It's a recalled vehicle. My son drives a Prius. It's a recalled vehicle. My mother-in-law is in an ES 2006. My father has a Sequoia. They're recalled vehicles. You know, I want to make sure that my loved ones are safe as well. And
but from switching back over to the engineering, but you still have been pretty evasive here about the cause, the actual cause of all this pain and suffering. There seems to be there's a lot of inconsistencies here and a lot of dualities that you're operating from. And I'm not sure if the apology, what is it based on? Is it sincere? Is this really a problem from an engineer's perspective that you assume responsibility for?
It's any time there is one death in one of our vehicles, that pains us to have that take place, regardless of how it happens. But it's critical today, and we weren't doing a good job in the past of investigating those quickly enough, especially when it had to do with unintended acceleration. And with adding these new engineers, these SWAT teams, that we're going to be able to get on site as rapidly as we can. Our goal is to make it in 24 hours. We need to be able to do that so we can understand what's happening and make the necessary changes so that it doesn't happen again. I can tell you, I lost a brother in an accident. a week after his 30th birthday. And that was 20-some years ago. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't think of that. So I know what these families go through.
Thank you, Mr. Rush. Mr. Markey, questions, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lentz, it seems to me that Toyota got the first alarm back in 2000 when the British ordered a Lexus recall due to acceleration problems. Toyota got a second alarm back in 2003 with the Canadian recall. Toyota is a global corporation. Those two alarm bells should have sent your engineers scrambling to figure out what was wrong and what was needed to be done to fix the problems. Instead, the same types of problems cropped up in additional Toyota models, resulting in the recalls that bring you here today. So instead of deploying your engineers after Toyota got those early warnings in 2000 and 2003, they waited until problems cropped up in the United States, and then Toyota deployed lawyers and lobbyists to convince the Department of Transportation that this was a small floor mat issue and not something more serious. And that, Mr. Lentz, has done a disservice to Toyota's customers and ultimately also to Toyota's dealers and to Toyota's employees. So according to documents obtained by my office, Toyota recalled a Lexus in the United Kingdom in 2000 and a Celica in Canada in 2003 because of floor mats were entrapping the accelerator pedal, and the exact same problem that has caused fatalities in this country. Why didn't Toyota take immediate action to prevent the much later accidents that Toyota clearly knew the problem existed as far back as 2000?
Specifically on those two incidences, I can't tell you the specifics of those because I do not know. But I can tell you that a weakness in our system has been, within this company, we didn't do a very good job of sharing information across the globe. Most of the information was one way. It would flow from the regional markets like the United States, Canada, or Europe back to Japan.
Okay. So
And-
what you're saying is that ultimately the decisions are made in Japan.
In the case
And
of
that
recall,
notwithstanding problems that are identified in the United Kingdom, in Canada, the information goes back to Toyota headquarters in Tokyo, and whether or not you in America are given orders to correct a problem identified in other countries is not in your hands. Is that what you're saying?
correct, but that is changing. There is going to be a number of different groups set up. There's a overall quality group that Akio Toyota is going to chair.
Well, you know, that's an important change. It obviously is a policy that I'm sure all Americans are shocked to learn existed. That is, that this system of quality control that Toyota represents to be at the heart of their corporation was not something that shared information about defects in products that were being sold in the United States, even though it was identified in other countries. And that's just unacceptable, just plain unacceptable to the consumers here in America. Let me move forward quickly if I can. You've told the Today Show that the sticky accelerator pedal and the mat problems were the only problems and that you fixed them. You've said today that you're only just beginning to test whether or not the electronics are the problem, and that you've acknowledged that you can't rule out that possibility. So the reality is you don't know what is causing all the vehicles to suddenly accelerate, and you don't know if you've solved the problem, do you?
There are many, many causes. In terms of the recalled vehicle.
But you don't know if you've solved the problem.
I don't think anyone, any manufacturer knows 100% exactly what is causing,
I'm
because
saying,
if we did,
what I'm saying is, since you're only beginning the investigation, you don't know if you've solved the problem. Is that correct?
ETCS has been looked at in the past in Japan as they develop the products. But
You said that you had solved the problem. The truth is, you don't know if you have solved the problem. Isn't that correct?
let me clarify my statement. In terms of solving the issues of those recalls, we solved the problem. And if in documents that we have also sent you, when I did a number of interviews with journalists, I made it quite clear that my feeling is, and this is a quote, my feeling is that these two fixes solve the issues that we know of. Are we going to remain vigilant? Of course we will. But we are confident that entrapment is a cause. We are confident that this pedal issue is a cause. And we are confident in those two fixes. But we are also confident that from what we know today, it is not an electronics issue.
What you know today, but again, you're only at the beginning of your investigation, so you don't know what caused the problem, do you?
We have not seen failures in the ETCS, and we have, this isn't the first time ETCS has been looked at. It is the first time that we've gone to Exponent to look at it. And when we put in our Quality North American Advisory Board, they will have total independent control of another study of their choosing. And that's going to take place, that committee is going to be in place by the end of March. So there's going to be another study soon, right after this.
And is the same thing true for the problem with the electronic throttle control system in your vehicles? Do you know what's wrong there?
That's what I'm talking about. Is electronic, the ETC is electronic control, sorry.
Okay. So you don't know what's wrong there either?
Well, again, we have not seen failures. It has been looked at in Japan in the past.
If there is no possible problem with your electronic throttle control systems, why do you need to find a way to override the electronic throttle? If there is no problem, why do you have to find a way to override?
You always have to keep your eyes and ears open in the event that there is something.
See, but you can't have it both ways. You can't say there's no problem, but you're trying to find a way to override something that's not a problem. It leaves people with the impression that there must be a problem.
But that's why you have to continually test and test and test in the event that something develops. It could be a change in EMI. It could be a number of different things that we have to continually test and verify.
I appreciate that, but I just wish that there was a little bit more humility here with regard to what you don't know, that you just say you don't know, and then the public, as they're driving around, carries that kind of cautionary warning with them as they're driving, pending the completion of all of your studies. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much.
Thank you, Mr. Markey. Next for questions, we'll go to Ms. DeGette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lentz, I don't know if you saw our opening statements or the previous panel's testimony, but I probably hold the record among the committee members because I have 3 Camrys, so I'm very, very concerned that we get this right, just like you are.
Thank
for
you.
your family. I want to ask you a couple questions. The first one is, you just told Mr. Markey that this is not the first time that you folks have looked at the ETCS. And you folks provided a number of documents in response to our February 2nd, 2010 request. Have you, as far as you know, has Toyota provided all of the documents relating to previous tests of the ETCS?
Again, I can't tell you it's a test or if it's just the development cycle of the ETCS.
I understand. I mean, we know that you've provided thousands of pages of documents relating to the development. What we want to know is, are there additional documents relating to the testing of the ETCS that you just testified that you folks, that it's not the first time you've looked at it? And I want to know, have we received all of the documents relating to previous testing of the ETCS? Because that's what we care about here.
Okay, understand. I'll have to check. I don't know specifically.
Okay, if there are additional documents, will you provide those, please, to
Of course.
this committee?
Of
Thank
course.
you. Now, the only document that Toyota has produced to us that we've seen that claims to address the phenomenon of sudden unintended acceleration is this February 2010 report that we've been talking about that was conducted by Exponent. My first question is, that report was commissioned in December 2009, just 2 months ago, by Toyota's defense attorney, Baumann and Brook, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
And how much money was paid? I know Mr. Boyer would want to know the answer to this question. How much money was paid to Exponent to produce that report for your defense attorneys?
I don't know. Do you guys know?
Okay, would you mind supplementing your response with that information?
Yeah, it's
Was it over $1,800 as far as you know?
yeah. I am sure it probably
I'm
was.
sure it is too.
And my understanding is we have given them an unlimited budget to test
Unlimited budget.
as much as they can to find out about that.
And I'm glad
Yes.
you have, but I don't, I mean, you, just as you wouldn't question the efficacy of what the previous witness testified to because he was paid a few $1,000s.
Right.
You wouldn't think that that would taint the scientific results of your experts either, would you?
Well, and that's why we have an advisory board.
Yes or no is a good answer
No,
for me.
yeah, I can understand why you would feel that way, but
No, I mean, you wouldn't think that your people would be tainted any more than the last witness would
No.
by being paid some kind of a money, correct?
no.
Thank you.
But-
Now, let me ask you this. The Exponent report was considered to be an interim report, correct? So they're still conducting tests.
Correct.
Is that right? Okay. Will you provide the committee with the final test results when they are obtained?
Yes, we are going to make that public.
And when do you expect that to happen, sir?
I don't know.
Now, it's my understanding that Toyota's counsel, Mr. Hester, who's sitting right behind you, told committee staff today that Toyota had, in fact, replicated Dr. Gilbert's tests, and that Toyota was able to produce the same conditions without triggering an error code. Is that correct?
Yes.
And
Exponent.
did Exponent do that test?
Exponent did that test
And when did Exponent do that test?
in the wee hours of the night last night.
Last night. Okay, so this is new information for us.
Yes.
And I am assuming Toyota will be willing to share the results of that testing also with this committee, correct?
Yes, we will.
Now, in your opening statement, you said that Toyota had done extensive testing of electronics and found no issues. Do you wish to change or clarify this remark in light of the findings disclosed to the committee today?
Again, I am relying on the representation from our engineering side in Japan, that they have told me that they have done extensive testing. I have not physically seen it myself. I have not seen test results. I'm relying on their information to me that they have tested it extensively.
Okay. In light of these new revelations revealed by your attorney, Mr. Hester, that Exponent was able to replicate the same conditions as Dr. Gilbert last night, does that change your testimony today?
I'm not sure I understand.
Okay. Late last night,
Yes.
according to your testimony.
Oh, okay, now I understand.
Okay.
We will provide that. I will tell you, again, I don't know exactly how Mr. Gilbert has done this.
Well, are you disagreeing with Exponent, who apparently was able to replicate the same test?
No, what I'm saying is I'm not sure if what Mr. Gilbert has done is necessarily something that's real world that can happen. And I can also tell you that Exponent was also able to do this on a competitive vehicle with the same result. So this is not necessarily something unique to Toyota. It may be unique to his test paradigm.
Okay. Now, I just have one last question for you. I would assume, in light of the questions raised by Dr. Gilbert's testimony today, as well as the witnesses, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and we have a lot more anecdotal information. I've got this couple in Colorado I've been talking about, and on and on. I am going to assume that Toyota's going to take this seriously, that they're not going to deny that these acceleration issues could be happening because of the ETCS, and that they're going to expeditiously investigate this and going to provide the results to this committee.
Yes.
Would that be a fair
Yes.
statement of your intention?
Yes.
I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. DeGette. Mr. Doyle for questions, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lentz, welcome, and thank
Thank
you
you, sir.
for all the questions you've answered. So, you heard the testimony of the first panel, and Dr. Gilbert sounds like a pretty reasonable guy. And you just found out that your testing company, Exponent, was able to duplicate what he did. Doesn't it make a whole bunch of sense? And I think that Joe Barton said the same thing, that you guys talk to Dr. Gilbert when hearing's over, probably offer him a little more than $1,800, and ask him to come down to Toyota or with Exponent, and the three of you sit together and see if there's something. What's the downside to testing this gentleman's theory?
Oh, there's no downside, and that's why I don't want to downplay what he has done. Again, I'm not sure about his testing paradigm, but we welcome anyone that can find any issues with our electronics. I mean, if there is a problem, we want to find it and we want to fix it. So, yeah, there's no problem with him getting together.
It's
with
in your
Exponent.
best interest to find. I mean,
Of
no
course
one
it
has
is.
more to lose than you and your employees and your dealers to not fix this problem. I mean, you should have every incentive, and I believe you do want to fix the problem. I mean, your company has a very good reputation. It's been put into question. And you know, perception is reality. We know
Yes, sir.
that in our business. And if the public thinks that your car isn't safe, you need to go out of your way to prove that it is.
Yes, sir.
And so I just think, you know, before you leave Washington, you ought to get this guy's phone number, and he should be sitting down with your people, and you ought to test his paradigm and see whether it has any merit.
And what's important is, when I was at Exponent, I drove a vehicle as they did the test to short circuit the accelerator pedal. And so I had the sense and the feel of what happens when it gets into limp mode, how they can measure based on the scan device what happened. And that's why I just have to really understand, as his Exponent, what Mr. Gilbert did, because my understanding is we were splicing wires together.
Well, if I were you, I'd want to know what he did too. There's no good outcome from you not trying to get this problem fixed. It's not good for America. It's not good for all the people that work for your company here in this country, and all the people that drive your cars, for you not to go the extra mile and test any theory that seems to have any merit to it.
I agree 100%, and that's
Very good.
also why, going forward, anytime we have a reported incident of UA, we're going to send a SWAT team out there. The goal is within 24 hours, so we can learn as much as we can. That's why it also would be helpful if we could get full VIN numbers from NHTSA, because sometimes they get a complaint that we don't ever receive. And the current thing, unless an investigation's opened up, we can't get that information. It would really be helpful for the entire industry, not just us.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, in the interest of time, I'm going to yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. Ms. Christensen for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to take this opportunity to welcome the dealers and the workers in the audience. I didn't recognize that they were here when I made my opening statement, but I did say at the time that we want this Toyota to really fix this quickly, not only for the customers, but for the workers and the families
Yes.
that depend on them having a job. Mr. Lentz, how long have you been in your position?
Since July of 2006, as an EVP, then president, and then president COO, but basically the same responsibility.
I read an article, I don't remember what paper, about a week and a half ago maybe, that was really talking about the history that Toyota has in not responding to complaints. But it started out by saying that in the late 80s, Toyota would actually go to a customer's home and say, your car has a problem, they'd pick it up and they'd take it and fix it. By the late 90s and beyond that, Toyota started maybe fixing problems that they found in future cars and not even telling the other customers about the problems. And then we have the failures that have brought us here today. So that's a total culture shift over that period of time. Can you tell us what happened? I mean, what happened to the Toyota of the 80s to bring us to the Toyota of 2010?
One comment before that is there are dealers that still make house calls. My father, who lives in Colorado, his salesman lives about 3 or 4 miles away. And every time he needs service, the salesperson drops his demo off, picks up my dad's car, and takes it in for service. So that does still happen. We're not totally out of the 80s yet. But I think what happened, I think we lost sight of the customer. I think I don't think it was a goal for us to grow faster, but we did. We had a lot of customers that loved our product. Our loyalty rates were growing higher and higher, and our volume grew. The complexity of the product line grew, from the number of models to the number of engines to the number of transmissions to everything else that goes with it. And I think we outgrew our engineering resource. And I think when that happens, and we had strategies to deal with that, but the strategies didn't work. And I think as a result of that, we're suffering from that today. And I think the most important thing is we lost sight of our customers. And I'll give you an example, even in the floor mat issue. In the very beginning, back in 2007, we recalled vehicles because of the all-weather mat. The mat was too thick, and there was risk it would bind up underneath the accelerator pedal. And it would happen if the mat wasn't properly put down. So from an engineering standpoint, if the mat's properly in place, it's no big problem. But we didn't understand a simple thing like how customers use a floor mat. Because in climates like this, people double stack mats. They put their rubber mat on top of their carpet mat, not just in our cars, but others. We didn't understand something as simple as that.
And just to get one other question, I'm really disturbed by what sounded like a real snap diagnosis. I'm a physician in the case of the mats. When we're presented with a problem, we can almost diagnose it by listening to the history, but we always look at every other possible cause before we really make a diagnosis and we start to treat. And that doesn't sound like it happened here. And in your business and my profession, lives depend on the decisions that we make. And it's really important to really examine all of the possible things, rule out for every other possibility. Can you assure me, I hear you saying that it's not this electronic thing. Can you assure us today that not only with this, but with every complaint, that you're going to do a complete diagnostic check?
Yes, I can tell you that the company's processes from top to bottom are being evaluated. And it's starting with the president of the company, who's going to speak tomorrow to one of the committees. He is responsible for a global quality committee. It's a brand new committee that's going to look just at quality and safety. And there are representatives from each of the large regions around the world that are on that. There is an independent advisory board that will report to that, to look over his shoulder.
Who appoints the independent advisory board? I mean, we talked about people paying and stuff. How do you get this independent?
You go out and hire safety and quality experts from outside of the company to oversee what's happening, to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And that's the North American region of that. And these committees are going to be announced by the end of March. They are going to be responsible for an independent, totally independent safety testing of the throttle control system.
My time is up. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Sutton for questions, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lentz, I'd like a little bit of clarification
Please.
on some of the points that have been raised here today during your testimony. A few moments ago, in response to one of the questions, you were talking about that we welcome anyone who can find the problem and so that we can fix it, something to that effect. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Is that? When you say we, who do you mean? We welcome?
Toyota.
Toyota International?
Yes, again, TMS
Toyota.
USA is a distributor for Toyota in the United States.
Correct.
My group does not design or engineer products.
And I'd like to talk about that a little bit,
Surely.
because you're the president of Toyota Motor Sales in the U.S., as was pointed out by Ranking Member Barton. Does Toyota Motor Sales make safety determinations? Does your department make safety determinations?
No. What we do is we get feedback from a number of different sources. We get feedbacks from customers that call in or contact us online. We look through the internet. We look at NHTSA data. We look at a number of different sources. We get reports from our dealers. We have product reports. All of that information from my side gets put together in reports, and they go to Japan, to the quality side. So
Okay.
to say that I'm not involved in quality, I am from an antenna standpoint.
Okay, but you also said during your testimony that the communication was pretty one-way with respect to safety and reporting back to Japan, because you've testified here today in relation to Mr. Markey's questions about the alarms that were going off in other parts of the world, and we just sort of had, we have a plea of ignorance that we didn't know here, and it might have made a difference in some of the accidents that could have been avoided. So I'm a little bit perplexed by the idea. Does Washington staff, safety staff that deals with NHTSA, report to you as the head of sales?
No,
Okay.
no.
Okay. Who does that safety staff that reports to NHTSA report to within your company?
Yeah, reports to TMA Washington, D.C. office.
Okay.
So there's Mr. Inaba, who is testifying tomorrow, is the chairman of Toyota Motor Sales USA, but he's the president of TMA. So that reports in through him, New York and Washington, D.C.
So he's the person who's responsible for safety decisions in the USA?
No.
No, it's still in Japan.
Still in Japan.
Correct.
Still in
Okay.
Japan.
Why would Toyota send the head of sales to discuss safety issues here today?
I was invited to attend.
Okay. All right. So was a decision made by the committee? Is that what you were invited by who to attend?
This
By
committee.
the committee?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Let me ask you this, because you said in your testimony, in recent months, we've not lived up to the high standards our customers and the public have come to expect from Toyota. And we're all concerned about that. And there are two groups of people who I think that we've all expressed concern for. Most obviously, the consumers out there who
Yes.
put their trust and faith and their families
Yes.
in those Toyota vehicles. And of course, the workers in this country who rely upon Toyota to make a living and take care of their families. I guess that's why I asked you the question about the we, because we've also heard a lot of confusing testimony about the electronic throttle control system. 6 years ago, NHTSA compiled data showing that Toyota Camrys with electronic throttle controls had over 400% more vehicle speed complaints than those with manual controls. So it's rather difficult to, do you think that that's an acceptable sort of number to suggest that there isn't something to it? I mean, 400% more.
No, there's no question it's a big number. But I think, again, we have to understand what those complaints are surrounding. I don't know if all of those are sudden acceleration instances.
Right.
There
Well,
may
why
be a-
don't we know all of that? 400%. We might not know everything, but when you say, I don't know if all are, that's a big statement, too. We must know more than that statement reflects.
Well, I can't tell you, again, if you're speaking off of the NHTSA database, unless those are investigated, I can't tell you just from the database exactly what's going on. And that's why it's important that we are able to get that information. And quite frankly, I would love to be able to get confidentiality agreements with insurance companies as well, where they can supply us with that kind of information so we can see what's happening.
Well, Mr. Lentz, the American people and the American market has been very, very good to Toyota. A lot of money has been made by the company in decades past. And so when we read, I'd like to assure the committee and the American people that nothing matters more to Toyota than the safety and reliability of the vehicles our customers drive. We're committed not only to fixing vehicles on the road and ensuring they are safe, but to making our new vehicles better. And your testimony continues. When we read that and then we hear the testimony about the safety decisions being made in Japan in a vacuum, isolating those who are selling these cars to our constituents and their families, and who are having the workers and the dealers sell these cars, it begs the question about why people would be concerned of where the facts match up with the testimony. And I yield back.
No, I understand, and that's why the process is changing, where there's going to be a person from the United States that sits on the defect committee in Japan to be able to make those decisions. And if they don't agree with that decision, there's going to be a possibility for us to then appeal that decision. And it's not just the United States, but from around the globe. We'll be on that.
Okay, Mr. Lentz, but I have to tell you, it comes very late.
Yes, sir.
We
Yes, ma'am.
appreciate that things get fixed, and that is the goal, that things get fixed, and no more loss of life is suffered. But again, one has to ask, would it have happened but for some of the mistakes coming to light? And I'm glad for the change. I hope it's enough. I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sutton. Ms. Schakowsky for questions, please.
Mr. Lentz, are you asking us to believe that no one at Toyota USA knew about recalls in Canada? I mean, it just strains credulity to think that.
Again, specifically on a 2003 Celica, I don't know the specifics on that. I don't know if that was a vehicle that was recalled here as well. I don't know the specifics, if that, again, was a certain floor mat issue that was unique to Canada. I just don't know details about that particular recall.
Except that you gave before as a reason that these things are not shared. And it's just really hard to imagine that whether it was deliberately shared or not, that given the fact that many Americans can see Canada from their house, that we did not know about the...
Again, I can't speak specifically to that exact instance. I don't know the details behind what it was recalled for.
Okay. In 2008, a woman named Guadalupe Alberto was killed when her 2005 Camry suddenly accelerated, jumped a curb, and struck a tree. Her car didn't even have floor mats at the time. So why wasn't this incident further investigated then? It says, I mean, we know as recently as November, or you say in November of 2009, Toyota, or at least up until then, was still claiming that floor mats were the only problem.
I don't know the specifics of that particular accident. I can look into it for you.
That'd be fine.
But
But
the floor mat issue came around earlier than that. The issue in November was really as we got into this issue of the sticky pedal that we learned
right,
about.
until then. But here was a 2008 accident. She didn't have a floor mat. But anyway, you know, we're all in the customer service business ourselves.
Right.
We have constituent service personnel in our offices. We take it very, very seriously. I heard you say that you apologized to customers for the problems with Toyotas. Did you apologize to customers who were treated like they were crazy when they made these complaints? Did you apologize to the Smiths?
I have not spoken to the Smiths, but I'm going to. Again, it was embarrassing to hear what happened to them. I don't know the specifics of the situation, but it's just to hear that, especially on the Lexus side of the business, that's a very unusual way for business to be done.
It's a very unusual way. Let me quote to you from a letter that was sent to a customer A 2005 Toyota Tacoma driver told your company that his truck accelerated by itself despite stepping on the brakes, slammed into 4 parked cars. Here was the answer. The throttle was inspected and moved freely without any binding and was found to operate as designed. The brakes will always override the accelerator, which may not have been true at the time. You said you're making that change. But anyway, in order for this accident to have happened as reported, 2 totally separate systems, the brakes and the throttle, would have to fail at exactly the same time. This is virtually impossible. And there's that phrase, that sentence, this is virtually impossible, seems to have been repeated over and over to your customers. You're in charge of sales. Is this any way to deal with customers, just to tell them absolutely impossible?
No, it's not. And I have talked to our group that I'm going to be involved in every event of unintended acceleration so that I know what happens. So you know, just overall customer complaints that come in. I get probably 20 or 25 complaints a week. Each and every one of those complaints, I have to receive a buck slip back to know exactly what the issue was, what the solution was, and whether the customer is satisfied or not. And I
You also review, I review letters that go out to my constituents. Does someone in authority review letters that are sent out so that the credibility of the customer is not only questioned, but just negated?
Yeah, I personally do not. I will find out. What is that, a recent letter?
Well, I'm looking at 3 answers that use the same phrase about virtually impossible. So
Okay.
I don't know the date.
Okay.
I'm sure our staff has those letters.
That's all right.
and the
I can
dates
check it.
on the letters. And my time is up, but I hope you'll also make sure that recalls that happen in other places are become part of the calculation of how you respond. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Braley for questions.
Mr. Lentz, I want to begin by commending you for sharing your personal story of loss with the committee here today. And that takes great courage. I would encourage you to share that story with the decision makers in Japan who are making the key decisions on product defects, product recalls, product retrofits, and failure analysis, because I think they need to hear that story from you.
Thank you.
I also want to commend you for commending the dealers in this country who have done an extraordinary job responding to your recalls and performing retrofits and tying up their staff all over this country. Some of them are my friends and my constituents. So I appreciate your recognition of the sacrifice they're making. I want to focus specifically on the comment that you made on page 2 of your statement, which you repeated here today, where you said, "We are confident that no problems exist with the electronic throttle control system in our vehicles. We have done extensive testing of the system and have never found a malfunction that caused unintended acceleration." I'm having a hard time squaring that with Toyota's 2002 Technical Service Bulletin, which noted that if customers complained of surging accelerators, reprogramming their engine, which you mentioned earlier, was a way to fix that problem, and that, sir, sounds like an electronic problem to me.
I don't know that for certain, because I can't tell you if it's a software issue, if it's a transmission issue. There are a number of different reasons for surges. It could be a high idle up that takes place sometimes when air conditioning kicks on, as an example.
But reprogramming the computer would not be a mechanical fix,
No.
would it?
No.
And the other reality of that notice is that these 2002 to 2006 Camrys, which were the subject of that Technical Service Bulletin, you're not addressing the problem of the brake override retrofit with those models, are you?
Camry, I would have to look and see what year it goes back to, back in the case of Camry.
Model throttle control system with an unlimited budget. So let's talk just a little bit about that. Your counsel who's with you today is with a very well-known firm that defends not just Toyota but other auto manufacturers in product liability and crashworthiness cases all over the country. You agree with that,
Yes.
correct? And I am in no way impugning them for their role, but I find it very odd that when you were presented with this challenge of getting to the root of this problem, you went to your defense firm to go make the contact to arrange for this independent testing.
Again, our legal staff put together the request. I can tell you that that report in its entirety is going to be made public.
And
So
we look forward to it,
So
sir.
if there are issues in it, it's going to come out.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the company that you retained, Exponent, because they're a successor corporation to a company called Failure Analysis Associates, which has done extensive work for not just Toyota, but all the big auto manufacturers and the motorcycle manufacturers on not only failure analysis, but also providing expert witness testimony. You're familiar with that?
I'm not sure about the expert witness, but I know they have worked for other automotives in things like vehicle stability control and other things that have been developed that have been great for the industry.
Sure, and one of the things that I can tell you is that I have a copy of a deposition that their chief technical officer, Roger McCarthy, provided in 1998. And in that deposition, he testified that Failure Analysis Associate, then known as Accenture, received between $30 and $40 million a year for the work they did for the auto industry. Were you aware of that?
No.
Well, isn't it true that Toyota has paid them over $1 million in the past for the work that they've done?
Exponent?
Yes.
I do not know.
But would you be willing to provide us with documentation of what Toyota has paid to Accenture, not just in relation with this study that's being done, or in relationship with Mr. Gilbert's follow-up analysis, but over the period of time that these recalls that are being considered or have been issued have been performed? Can you do that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would make a formal request that we get as much information as we can from Toyota International, Toyota North America, documenting the financial relationship between their company and Accenture or its predecessor Failure Analysis Associate, not just in relationship with the study that was done that's been the subject of this
That's fine,
testimony.
we'll do that.
All right. Now, one of the things that you talked about was the fact that you were present during some testing that was done at Accenture.
Exponent, yes.
Exponent, yes. And is that something that you were part of when there was filming that was done to document the testing?
No, I
But-
just
but-
wanted to go see how they test. I've never been in a vehicle that's gone into fail-safe mode. So I
Okay.
wanted to understand what it feels like from the consumer standpoint, what fail-safe feels like as you're driving down the road.
Were you involved in any way in the analysis in terms of defining the scope of that project or
No.
how the results would be submitted?
No, the only portion I was involved in was that when that research becomes available in its entirety, it would be made public. It would be made available to Congress and NHTSA.
And did Toyota make a direct relationship for the performance of those services with Exponent, or was that something handled by Bowman and Brook?
I don't know.
Because
how it
when
was
you
arranged.
indicate in your statement that you requested them to do a comprehensive independent analysis with an unlimited budget, I'm just wondering whether there are documents that would define the scope of that request and the terms under which Exponent would be compensated for what they were performing. Are you
I'm sure-
aware of that?
I'm not aware of it, but I'm sure it must exist.
Okay, then I would also request that, Mr. Chairman, and I would yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Braley. That concludes questions by members of the subcommittee. We'll go to questions from members of the full committee. Mr. Booyer?
Yes. As far as I know, Accenture has not been hired by you to do any engineering or testing, have they?
Exponent,
Right.
yes,
Accenture is like an accounting financial firm, right?
yes.
All right. You were asked questions by my Democrat colleague about Accenture, and I just want to make sure that, for the record, it's been cleared. With regard to the firm that you hired, Exponent, as far as I'm aware, even the United States government turned to this firm to help us come to the solutions as to why we lost the shuttle Columbia. Is that correct?
Yes,
So this is not a fly-by-night firm. This is someone who is one of the best in the United States that is when it comes to problem solving.
Yes,
Is that correct?
we want to define the best. And again, there will be another review of this ETCS done by this independent study group. They may choose
Now-
to go with them, they may choose someone else.
Now, with regard to some testimony that I wrote this down because it was bothersome to me. You said that with regard to testing that was done last night, with regard to the methodology used by Dr. Gilbert on the first panel, you said, quote, "It's not a real-world scenario." So can you explain that a little bit further? In other words, he did testify that he used manipulation. He told me that he did not cut 3 wires. But when you say that there was a methodology that's not a real-world scenario, help me understand.
Well, yeah, I think he said tapped in, which is how he gets into the harness. Our understanding is, and again, this happened just 12 hours ago, so I don't want to attack him without knowing exactly what his process was. But my understanding is he took the plug off the back of the accelerator pedal. There are 6 wires on the back of that. 2 that go to the sensor, 2 that go to the power, and 2 that go to the ground. And he tapped into the 2 that go to the sensor, and basically through some device tied those 2 together, and then tied one of the power wires into another one. So again, it just doesn't seem as if that is something that may necessarily happen in the real world. And Exponent has tested what happens if you lose ground, what happens if the sensors break down, but in a very different way. So I just would like to understand his methodology and make sure that it's not the testing paradigm that's causing this.
So when ABC showed this, in order to have these results, your testimony would be that Dr. Gilbert had to induce fault by manipulation to create and generate an artificial voltage for the result for which he was seeking.
Yes, and go around the
And so
sensor.
that normally isn't going to happen as I'm driving one of your products down the road. Would that be correct?
I believe so. Again, I'm not an
Okay.
engineer. That's what I need to study through Exponent, because they did the same study.
All right. Earlier, I made the comment about, I think the American public, we have seen what happens when NBC Dateline staged a staged crash between 2 trucks to claim that General Motors' fuel tank design caused fire crash on a crash test on television, and we were all pretty upset over it. And so now what we have is a repeat scenario with regard to ABC, also using a manipulation, not using a real-world scenario. So that type of thing can be left to the credibility of the viewer and the American public. Now I'm going to shift. The reason I'm going to shift is, let's go back to Columbia. Okay? When there is a crash in America and we have a concern, we go to the product. So Exponent looks at Columbia, tries to gather as much information as they possibly can, data and what's left.
Right.
When there is an airline that crashes, NTSB will go in and try to recreate and rebuild that aircraft. When I look at what Exponent is doing, and I look at the report, and I look at the thousands of vehicles that they're looking at, what bothers me is why wouldn't you, when an automobile that has been identified as this sudden, unintended acceleration, why isn't that product pulled aside and ripped apart so you can understand what is exactly going on? Those are the 1,000 ones that, if I were in your seat, that I would be going after and applying the greatest minds of the world to understand.
Yeah, in many cases, one of the field technical specialists or one of the quality specialists, they do go out. And if there is a component failure, they would take that component off and send it to the quality side to see what's going on. But in the case of the electronic throttle, if they don't get a code reading out that shows a failure, and they can't recreate it, it's very, very difficult to be able to do that. Now, they may take the throttle body off if it's cracked or if it's somehow defective. They'll take a pedal off if it's defective. If an ECU is defective, they'll take that off. But in many cases, that's what's so frustrating about unintended acceleration, is it's very, very difficult to duplicate. And unless they can duplicate it, they have no way of knowing exactly what's taken place.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Gonzalez for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lentz, in my limited view of things, I always think in terms, how is the consumer protected? How is the best interest promoted? And I've just concluded that, one, it's the manufacturer's own moral behavior, first and foremost. Then we go into the governmental regulatory oversight. And then we have our civil justice system. I'm a great believer in the civil justice system. The problem, that's always after the fact, way after the fact. So I'm looking at the manufacturer's moral behavior, and I'm looking at the capabilities, proficiency, and competency of the regulatory scheme that Congress has in place. When any of this breaks down, Congress will move forward. And you heard Mr. Waxman say, look, we may need legislation, and that's the process that we're engaging in at this time. It's going to get hot and heavy, and you're going to see all the different interests. Last week I was on the radio, and when I simply said, let us not rush to judgment. That goes whether it's Toyota, whether it's GM, Ford, I don't care who it is, an individual or a corporation. The interviewer then said, are you apologizing for Toyota? So we've got that issue. Now, we have members of Congress that may be a little aggressive in fulfilling their duties. You have letters going out that are saying, it does sometimes appear, however, that the negative news is being encouraged by plaintiffs' trial lawyers, union activists, and those interested in cutting into Toyota's market share. That's the environment. It's not healthy. It's not good. And all these reasons, which are totally wrong and ridiculous, are being attributed to those individuals simply trying to do their jobs as members of Congress. So I'm hoping that this process will be fair. But in the meantime, if there is a rush to judgment, this is the danger. Not just a Toyota, but everybody that will be similarly situated sometime in their lives, whether it's an individual, a company, or a corporation, is that months from now, we may discover that it wasn't electronic, and that all of the action that was taken was timely and diligent. But it really won't matter. We have an old saying, and I said this the other day. Everyone will remember the accusation. No one will remember the exoneration. And for a business in the United States, people are making decisions today on what car they're going to buy. By the time we figure out what the truth may be, that decision has been made. And I'm going to tell you that I believe what's going on today will affect that decision. Okay. That's why we all have to be so careful in how we do this, and that we're fair to all parties, whether it's going to be the consumer, the Smiths, or even Toyota, but to be fair to everyone. I want to know what you can tell Toyota owners today regarding the safety of their vehicles.
What I can tell them, and I'm not going to go through the detail of all of my family drive products. I would not have my loved ones driving products, recalled or not, if I didn't feel they were safe. So that's number one. Number two is we have processes in place, new processes in place, that are going to ensure a lot more transparency and responsibility to make sure we make faster decisions that are the right decisions. So everybody has defects. Everybody's going to have recalls. But how quickly we react to protect that consumer, how much the consumer sees us standing behind their product, that's what's most important. And I can tell you the other thing, we have a lot of dealers sitting behind me. The way we start to build trust in our brand is through our dealers, because our dealers are the true contact with the customer, and they are doing a tremendous job in taking care of these situations. I mean, almost 800,000 customers already taken care of in about 20 days is an amazing number. And you'll hear from the dealers that the customers are understanding. Sure, there are one or two customers in each dealership that are pretty upset at what's going on. But for the most part, our loyal customers, they know for the last 50 years that we've stood behind our product. We've done the right thing for them.
Well, let me ask you this, because I think he touched on it. I have 35 seconds, but quickly. You drive Toyotas, your family drives Toyotas, everybody you care about drives Toyotas. You're going to quit driving Toyotas?
No, sir.
And you heard that members of Congress on this committee drive Toyotas. I'm not going to ask them whether they're going to quit driving their Toyotas. My suspicion is that they will not. So I think maybe that's the message that comes from this hearing today. We're going to be aggressive, we're going to be vigilant, diligent, we're going to get to the bottom of this. The question is, to what degree can we protect the American consumer? And I believe that we're going to measure up to that duty and responsibility that we owe them. And I just, again, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, and I
yield
agree.
back, Mr. Chairman.
It starts with us.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Mr. McInerney, who's joined us, member of the full committee. Questions, please. 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you allowing me to address the hearing. Mr. Lenz, thank you for attending today and taking some tough questions. Addressing the safety issues we're discussing today is vitally important, but I'd like to focus my questions on a related matter that I believe reflects on Toyota's disregard for its loyal customers and its loyal employees. I'm referring to the decision recently to shut down operations at NUMMI plant in Fremont, California, which will cost us about 35,000 jobs in the state of California. And I don't believe that Toyota has done nearly enough to prevent this loss of jobs. I have an opening statement that I'd like to include in the record, Mr. Chairman.
Will be without objection.
Mr. Lenz, Toyota is currently experiencing major public relations problems, and the public concern about safety failures is going to hurt your bottom line. California is one of your biggest markets, and it's obvious that keeping NUMMI open will help rebuild your image. Wouldn't that be beneficial to Toyota?
Our image is beneficial, but specifically NUMMI, I think we have to be clear that Toyota is not shutting down NUMMI. NUMMI is shutting down NUMMI. It's a separate corporation that was 50% owned by Toyota and owned by General Motors. And when General Motors moved into bankruptcy and the new partner became Motors Holding, Liquidation Holding, it was General Motors abandoning NUMMI that set this in play. That's the truth of the matter. When they pulled out, and they pulled out 30% of their volume, that plant was difficult to become commercially viable. It's a long way from our supply lines. We supply a lot of...
It's not a long way from your customer lines. Mr. Lenz, I understand that the Pontiac Vibe was only about 20% of production at NUMMI in 2008, with Toyota vehicles making up the rest of that production. Surely Toyota could modify its operations to account for a 20% drop in production. It seems to me that you're putting NUMMI out of business because of antipathy toward West Coast workers, not out of necessity. Unfortunately, Toyota hasn't demonstrated that it made any meaningful effort to explore possibilities that would keep NUMMI open. And I was asking you, do you expect Californians to believe that in the brief time between GM's announcement and your decision to close, were you able to definitively determine that it was impossible to maintain operations at NUMMI?
Yes, it's not financially viable to do. It's a long way from our logistics lines. The volume, 20% is a pretty big number. I mean, California sells about 13 to 14% of the nation's sales. That's a plant that has capacity for almost 400,000 vehicles, that's building around 300 at the most. I mean, you've got to remember that when this industry collapsed after Lehman, we had a 40% collapse from the peak of the marketplace in 2000, 2001 to where we ended last year. There was tremendous overcapacity all across the United States. And it's not something you take lightly, closing a plant. I mean, you look at the workers behind me. When that market collapsed and we had 100,000 unassigned vehicles sitting at our ports that we didn't have dealers to be able to accept because the inventories were so high, we didn't lay these people off. We kept these people working because we know that they are a huge asset for us. So we don't take closing a plant, or NUMMI doesn't take closing a plant lightly. We believe in our workers. They've done a tremendous job in getting us through all this. So NUMMI is, unfortunately, we're going to stop ordering product at the end of March. And we will do what we can to try to help the workers through transition. And hopefully, I don't know if another assembly can go in there or they can redevelop the property and create jobs through the redevelopment and whatever goes in there, but it's just, it's not.
Mr. Lenz, I'm really thinking of your benefit as well as ours. I mean, I'll leave you with this parting thought. You're having a public relations nightmare right now, and it may benefit you a slight amount to close a plant like that, but you're going to face a public backlash in the West Coast. Now, on the other hand, if you work with us to keep that open, it's going to be a real plus for your public relations issues. I just ask you to keep that in mind as you move forward.
Okay, just understand as well, we're going to do whatever we can to help through that transition. We're not legally obligated, but we are going to throw money into it to help through this. I just wish that our partner of 25 years would step up and do the same.
That's all.
Thank you, Mr. McInerney. Let me just ask you a few questions, clarify record a little bit
Please.
if I can. There's been a lot of testimony here and a lot of questions. So just make sure I'm correct here. The only independent analysis that you've had, when you spoke on today's show, you said you have independent analysis on your problems with the sudden acceleration, has been Exponent, correct?
Yes, to my knowledge.
And you were referring to that report of Exponent, right?
Yeah, now NHTSA has also done studies in the past, but I don't know how robust they are, so I don't want to,
But you don't have knowledge of any independent studies they
No.
did? Okay.
No, not to my knowledge.
All right. And there's been no independent electronic throttle control system studies?
Not of Toyota. There may be industry-wide, I don't know.
Okay, but for your...
Yes, to my knowledge.
After this situation, okay. And with Dr. Gilbert here, he's come up with this, and apparently your Exponent's engineer's been able to duplicate it. Is it fair to say then, when they duplicated it, they get the same result as Dr. Gilbert, that the fail-safe system did not receive the signal to enact? So in other words, the fail-safe system, whether it's an override by electric, however it was happened, the diagnostic codes did not kick in to put in the fail-safe system to get that braking going.
Yeah, I believe what he's done is gone around, designed a way to go around the override system.
Sure.
So whether it can happen or not is...
And we don't know the source of it, but it's a bookend, as they said, to start the research.
Yes.
And that could be of value to Toyota in trying to resolve this. Okay. You mentioned the SWAT team you're going to have at the end of March. I think
Yes.
you said you're going to have them. And in 24 hours, they'll have information be on site. Let me ask you this. Mr. Dingell asked, and a couple of questions have been about this event data recorder.
Yes.
The event data recorder, as you said, tells you what happens 5 seconds before an accident and 1 second after. Specific requests have been made on the Auburn, New York crash, which was a 210 Camry. That ERB has been seized. Do you know where it is? Why isn't the information made available to NHTSA or anyone else? No one seems to know the results.
I don't know. Well, if I can get information on that crash.
Okay. Well, how about the South Lake, Texas one? That was at 208 Toyota Avalon. Mr. Rush brought up, happened on December 26th. Same thing. It says conduct a site visit on 112 where they pulled the black box out, if you will. Where's the results on that?
And they pulled the pedal off. I don't know, because I know NHTSA was also down there with our engineers, but I don't know specifically what the result was.
Or how about Mr. Jeff Popinski? He was from Minnesota. He's had a 207 Lexus ES350 and had problems with it and requested repeatedly from Toyota to give him the information off the black box, and he's always been denied. If we're going to have this SWAT team and we're going to be more transparent and bring forth this information, why not on these fatal crashes, especially these ones I mentioned, why not disclose what happened on that black box?
Well, I think right now the issue is there's one tool in the entire United States, and I believe it's still in the prototype stages. So the final production tools we won't start seeing here until April. So as
but standards for the black box were developed in 2006 by NHTSA that everybody has to have starting 2012 and 2013, correct?
Yeah, it's in 2012.
So if we have standards in 2006, you're still trying to develop a prototype?
That's my understanding.
Okay. So the information off this black box, then, if I wanted to get the information, if there's no mechanism in the United States, it has to go to Japan to get the information?
Correct. Correct. It is a unique mechanism for our black box.
And this defect committee, U.S. may have a representative on it, but decisions are still going to be made in Japan?
Well, there will be, the process of making a defect decision is there's a general manager of the quality group that has a committee with a number of different engineers and everyone else. That has always been in Japan with Japanese. That committee now is going to have people that will be seated on that from other parts of the regions around the world.
Sure.
United States for certain, I don't know. I'm assuming Europe will probably be there as well. So they will be they will be tied into all the information available, into the decision process, and we will have the ability to appeal that
Right.
if we don't believe in it.
You have input, but decision will still be made in Japan.
Yeah, well, the input will be made, but we will have the ability to appeal that decision that we do not have today.
Let me just ask, on the black box there, where's that data stored?
Pardon?
Where's that data stored? If I get a black box out of the South Lake, Texas accident, where would that data be stored? Would that have to go to Japan to get downloaded?
No, I mean, if we have the scan tool, once these tools are available.
Right. But right now, because you don't have the scan tools.
Yeah, I don't know if Japan has tools. And if we're in prototype stage, I'm assuming that it's a global prototype stage. I don't know that for certain. But I do know in April, we're slated to receive about 100 of these.
All right. That'll be in April, okay? If you receive, personally, you said you receive 20 to 25 complaints a week. Any of them on unattended accelerations?
I've got to tell you, in the last 3 years, I've seen them on surges, but I don't recall any one that was on an unintended incident.
Could you provide us an example of some of those surges that you personally handled?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Mr. Burgess, did you have any questions?
Yeah, I think it's already been addressed, but just would like for you, Mr. Lentz, or Toyota to provide the committee your analysis or Exponent's analysis of when they do the Gilbert testing, the retesting on the Gilbert thing. And I just echo about the black box. I mean, South Lake is right outside of my district. A very tragic accident right after Christmas where a car went through an intersection and ended up upside down in a pond, and all the occupants died. Some question as to whether or not there might have been a medical emergency involved in that, but I think the black box, in addition to the other physical evidence, the brake pads and that sort of thing, will be very instructive for your group and, of course, instructive for us as well. So as this information on these lookbacks, if you go out and get the car from Tennessee and your engineers come up with a decision on this, I just think it'd be very useful that this committee would have that information as early as possible after you get that.
Surely.
And heaven help us if there's another uncommanded acceleration, but get that car.
Yeah.
The first thing that happens is somebody has to look at that car and figure out what's going on with this.
Appreciate it.
We're about to wrap up. I see Mr. Engel is here. Did you have a question, Mr. Engel, of this witness? You're a member of the full committee.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think a lot of the questions have already been asked. But, when I was asked by the media yesterday what question was I going to ask, I said that I would ask, what did you know and when did you know it, and what do you still know that we don't know? And I've listened to the hearing, and Mr. Lentz, all I can say is that I hope you can appreciate that we are very skeptical because it certainly seems, if you just look at the chain of events, that there was an attempt to kind of sweep everything under the rug. And I'm still not sure that the question has been reasonably answered in terms of, you talk about these 6 vehicles that you tested, but why would not your first inclination be to test the vehicles that accelerated? When I heard Mrs. Smith earlier on, the first panel, and she talked about how it just went 100 miles an hour and she couldn't do anything to stop it, wouldn't it have just been logical to take that car and others like that and just rip it apart? I know Mr. Barton asked you it earlier, but I'm not sure I'm satisfied with your answer.
Again, I don't know the specifics, but it sounded as if she said that there was a technical person that was down there and did look at the car. So I can't tell you if they didn't see anything, that's probably why they didn't tear it apart. If they would have seen a component failure, I'm sure that component failure would have come off that car and we would have received it. And again, it may have happened, I don't know. I don't know the specifics on her accident.
But it wasn't only her car. There were others that gave similar stories. And for how long was Toyota saying it's mats, floor mats, or rugs, or sticky pedals, when it just would seem clear by her story? I'm sure there were others like her that it wasn't that at all.
Well, it may not be. There are so many different causes. They're very broad. They're very rare. And in some cases, they're just very, very difficult to duplicate. So that's the frustrating part about researching what happens on some of these instances, especially if there is something that's going on with the throttle. If there aren't error codes and it can't be duplicated, that was one of the challenges with the sticky pedal in the beginning, was by the time the consumer got it to the dealership, all the moisture had dried from the pedal and the pedal wouldn't stick. And you've got a consumer saying, I'm telling you, I know this thing's been sticking, but by the time they get to the store, it can't be replicated. And that took a while to understand exactly what was going on.
But in every case, would that happen in every case? I mean, surely once there were many different instances, it seemed to be a pattern that, you didn't have to be a rocket scientist to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe something is wrong. There's not only the acceleration, but we've heard about the steering and brakes and other things. And, it just seems that if you look at everything, it certainly seems to me that there was an attempt to keep it under the rug and keep it under the table. Let's not tell anybody anything, and maybe it'll go away. I just, and of course, with all the testimony, I mean, NHTSA is to blame as well. But I just don't think that Toyota handled it properly. So let me just go ahead.
Well, no, in the case of brakes, if you're talking about Prius brake, we jumped on that very quickly and have taken care of that. And in the case of Corolla steering, it's being investigated right now. So yes, we have complaints on it. NHTSA has complaints. And we're digging into that right now to find out what is the issue, and let's make sure the customers are happy with their products and safe with their products.
So let me ask you as the last question. When I was asked yesterday, what would I ask you? And I said, what did you know and when did you know it? And what do you know that we don't know yet? What do you know that we don't know yet? What's going to come out in the days and weeks? I know Mr. Toyota is testifying at another committee tomorrow. What bombshells are going to come out that we don't yet know?
God, I hope there aren't any more. I've had enough bombshells for 1 year. I'd get back to the good old days of 2009, and I don't think I'd ever say that. Right now, we have to fix the process so these things don't happen again. I don't know what's behind the curtain. No one knows in the auto industry as manufacturers what defects you could have down the road, what challenges you have. So it's important that we have built-in quality and built-in safety so we don't have these issues. And that's why our processes are changing, to make sure that we get back to where we once were. I mean, this was a company for 50 years in the U.S. that whenever you said Toyota or you said Camry, it was quality, dependability, reliability, and safety. And we've stubbed our toe. And we've got to get back to where that once was. And we're going to do that.
Well, I would hope so. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding the hearing.
Mr. Gingrich, question.
Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Lentz, very, very quickly, I could ask you a couple of yes/no questions like, have you enjoyed being here today? And do you want to take any more questions? And I guess the answers would be yes and no. But seriously, I did want to ask you, do you think that this is a software or hardware problem?
In the case of the ETC?
Yes.
Again, based on our analysis of what we've seen, based on going to accident sites and checking these cars out, I don't think it's either right now, but Exponent has not tested the software yet. So that's yet to come. So if there is a software issue, if there's an issue about how independently these two processors are working, because that's the key to make sure that this thing works, we'll know that.
But it could be either, and you're going to get to the bottom of that.
We have to get to the bottom of it.
Absolutely.
And it may be that the bottom of it is they find nothing. And we have another independent group that goes in and researches again.
Mr. Lentz, thank you. Mr. Chairman, that's all I've got, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Gingrich. That concludes all questions of this panel. Mr. Lentz, thank you. We'd invite you to stay for the next panel. It's going to be Secretary LaHood. We have 5 votes coming up. I'm going to try to get the Secretary's testimony in, and then we can go vote. We'll have a little recess. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to ask the media to move out of the way, please. Secretary LaHood is here. We'd like to hear his testimony and get it done before we have to go vote. Mr. Lentz, if I see you're moving out, if you'd keep on, we're trying to get the secretary in. Thanks, eh? I know you're getting crushed there, but we're trying to move things along. I'd like to call our third witness for today, the Honorable Raymond H. LaHood, Secretary of the United States Department of Transportation. And Mr. LaHood, welcome, and thanks for being here. It's the policy of this subcommittee to take all testimony under oath. Please be advised you have a right under the rules of the House to be advised by counsel during your testimony. You wish to be represented by counsel. Thank you. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but truth, and matter pending before this committee? Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We'll look forward to your opening statement, and after that, we're probably going to run and have to do some votes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the important issue of Toyota recent safety recalls. Ever since I was sworn in as the Secretary of Transportation 13 months ago, I have said that safety is the department's #1 priority. I'd like to think that we have demonstrated that commitment time and time and time again. When the terrible crash of the Washington Metro system claimed 9 lives and injured dozens of others last summer, we quickly introduced legislation to give us federal safety oversight of transit systems sometimes we don't currently have. When Colgan Air Flight 3407 crashed in Buffalo, we learned right away what many of the problems were, and we did not wait a year for the NTSB to conclude its investigation before we acted. We began working with the aviation industry immediately to enhance airline safety and pilot training, holding 12 safety summits around the country. This spring, the FAA will issue a new rule to combat pilot fatigue, and it has already begun to overhaul pilot certification qualifications. One of the hallmarks of my time as Transportation Secretary has been our work on distracted driving. For all of you with cell phones and BlackBerries and other electronic devices, I'm on a rampage about people talking and texting while driving a bus, a car, a train, or a plane. It's a menace to society, and we recently exercised our authority to ban truck drivers from texting. The reason I say all of this, my #1 priority has been and will be, as long as I'm in this post, safety. Now for Toyota. The Toyota recall situation is very serious, and we're treating it seriously. The 3 recalls involving Toyota are among the largest in automobile history, affecting more than 6 million people in this country. And I'd like to say a word directly to consumers. If you notice that your gas pedal or your brake is not responding as it normally would, contact your Toyota dealer right away. The recent recalls involve 3 issues. First, accelerator pedal entrapment by floor mats, which can lead to uncontrolled acceleration at very high speeds. It's important to take your floor mats out of the driver's side of your vehicle until your car has been repaired for this problem by a Toyota dealer. Second, accelerator pedals sticking or returning slowly after being depressed. If the pedal is harder to depress or slower to return after releasing it, this could be the precursor to what is known as a sticky pedal. If your metal has these symptoms, contact your Toyota dealer immediately. If your gas pedal becomes stuck for any reason, steadily apply the brake, put the car in neutral, bring it to a stop in a safe place, and call your dealer. Finally, with the Toyota Prius for model year 2010 and the Lexus HS250, if you experience a change in your car's braking performance, contact your Toyota dealer. Now, I want everyone to know that the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has been has the most effective defect investigation programs in the world, known as NHTSA. Its job is to investigate complaints and to look for defects. It receives more than 30,000 complaints from consumers every year and reviews every one of them quickly and carefully. Over just the past 3 years, NHTSA's defect and compliance investigation have resulted in 524 recalls involving 23.5 million cars. Of the 100 investigations NHTSA opened in an average year, there are currently 44 open defect investigations, 5 in which involve Toyota. Every step of the way, NHTSA officials have pushed Toyota to take corrective action so that consumers could be safe. Unhappy with Toyota responsiveness to our safety concerns, the acting administrator of NHTSA, Ron Medford, and 2 associates flew to Japan in December of '09 to clarify for Toyota management what the company's legal obligations are to find and remedy safety defects in vehicles sold here. In January, our new administrator of NHTSA, David Strickland, and Ron Medford, now our deputy administrator, told the president of Toyota North America in no uncertain terms that we expect prompt action following the disclosure of the sticky pedal. Toyota publicly announced that recall 2 days later. And I've also talked personally to the president of Toyota with potential fatal defects on the road. NHTSA has pressed hard to expedite these safety fixes. If NHTSA had opened a formal investigation and Toyota had resisted a recall, this would have consumed an enormous amount of time and resources, in effect extending the period in which owners of affected vehicles were at risk. By engaging Toyota directly and persuading the company to take action, the agency avoided a lengthy investigation that would have delayed fixes for a year or more. Last week, I announced that we are investigating whether Toyota acted quickly enough in reporting these safety defects to NHTSA, as well as whether they took all appropriate action to protect consumers. We have asked Toyota to turn over a wide range of documents which will show us when and how they learned about these safety problems. NHTSA will continue to make sure Toyota is doing all it has promised to make its vehicles safe. We will continue to investigate all possible causes of unintended acceleration. While the recalls are important steps in that direction, we don't maintain that they answer every question about that issue. Some people believe that electromagnetic interference has a dangerous effect on these vehicles, although we are not aware of any incidents proven to be the cause by such interference. NHTSA is doing a thorough review of that subject to ensure safety. If NHTSA finds a problem, we will make sure it's resolved. Recently, I spoke by phone with Mr. Toyota. He assured me that Toyota takes U.S. safety concerns very seriously and that safety is the company's top priority. I intend to hold him to that. Finally, I want to remind everyone there is a reason we investigate safety defects, and there's a reason we push automakers to do the right thing. I listened to the 911 tape of the Saylor family's harrowing last moments. Mark Saylor, a California highway patrolman, died last year along with his wife and his daughter and his brother-in-law when the accelerator got stuck and the Lexus they were driving crashed at more than 120 miles an hour. That is a horrible tragedy, and one I hope that no other family has to endure. Now, Mr. Chairman, I know that you all have to go vote, and I'm certainly willing to stay and answer all the questions that any member wants. I want the committee to know I was sworn in on January 23rd, '09. I'll take a back seat to nobody on safety. I've done a lot. We've done a lot. So I'll try and answer every question as specifically as I can during my time as the Secretary. And for those that I don't know the answer to prior to my tenure, I'll be happy to get all the information possible for the record. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And you're right, we do have votes. We have 5 votes. We're going to be in recess until 5:30. 5:30. And appreciate if you would stay, and we look forward to answering questions then. If you want to walk to the floor with us, you're more than welcome to do so.
Ray.
Oh, I've read a lot about you.
Me too. I'd like
Ray.
to invite you to come over.
How are you, Bobby?
How you doing, man?
Good to see you. Great to see you.
Before I go vote,